Hey, John from Mighty here, and in this video, I'm going to walk you guys through how to add anchor links within your Articulate Rise course, specifically focusing in on a lesson and having text at some point in your lesson that you want to be clickable for your learner that would auto scroll you down to a certain section in your lesson. There's going to be some HTML and some JavaScript that we'll talk about. You'll need the Mighty extension for this to be possible, but once we walk through everything, which is very straightforward, you'll be good to go to add anchor links throughout your course. Let's dive in. All right, so as we dive into this course, I want to show you exactly what we mean with anchor links. So in here, in this example, let's go ahead and preview this. We've got more or less a singular brochure where we're going to go back and forth between a top 10 guide. So up at the top, I just want to give the learner an overview of all the topics that we're going to cover. But then as you just scroll down, these are the various topics that we want to jump to. They're short and sweet with an ability for you to be able to just like jump back up to the list. So that way you could review some of the next items. And if you want to jump around, it makes it very, very easy. But right now in Rise, you do not have the ability to do that. You're just not able to create anchor links. As soon as you try, it'll actually open up a new tab and take you potentially even to just like the cover page as an example. So there's some fun JavaScript that we will add using our custom code feature, as well as some HTML updates that we'll put right here on some of these items to kind of show you how to get this to work. Step number one is let's go up to this like table of contents section and create a link that would eventually take us down to section number one. So from here, let's go ahead and insert the link, and we'll just go to a hash. We don't really care exactly where it goes. Again, we're going to override that. And then let's go into the code view and talk about some things that you'll need to add. If you get stuck like this, where it doesn't actually allow you to go into the code view, if you just add a space at the end and then highlight, it'll allow you to get into the full rich text editor in which you can jump into this code view section. All right, now let's talk about a couple of things that Rise does that maybe isn't ideal and we have to just have a little bit of a workaround for. So to talk about how HTML semantic works, there's two options that we've got access to here. There's this paragraph element, which is a block level element in the HTML. And then there's items like this link element, as well as we're going to introduce a span element. And those are more inline elements. So out of like normal HTML development, you're always able to use these things called data attributes, which are more intended to be custom used in situations like this. But Articulate Rise automatically strips out certain properties out of your HTML. And definitely if you're not using the Mighty extension where you've got access to this Mighty editor, it's going to strip out a lot of this information for you. And in fact, there's not even really a code view at all for you. So we need to be very specific about where we place some of these attributes so that way you can leverage them when actually previewing your course. So in this situation, now that we've got a link, we're going to add a span because I've got some JavaScript written which looks for spans within a link. And then from there, we're able to tack on our anchor scrolling. So we've got this span. We'll go ahead and close that out here. And what we're going to do is we're going to just simply add a data anchor ID to this span, which will then get picked up by our JavaScript and allow us to auto scroll to where its companion is. So in here, we're going to add this. This is the clarifying ambiguity. And from here, if we just take this data anchor and close this out, go down to where we want to go, and look in the code view here. Again, we've got access now to this span here, which is an inline element. So great, all we need to do is add that data anchor attribute and we're good to go. If that didn't exist, we would have to create inside of this block element a span with this. But we already had a style, and this looks like it's also applying some colors, so we're good to go. we can go ahead and close that out. And from here, we will preview this just so that way you can see exactly what Rise does out of the gate, which isn't ideal. So we get into our course, we see this link. If we click that link, it just opens up a new tab and takes them back to the cover page. Not ideal. But from here, this is where we get back into the JavaScript. So we'll go back to the edit side and jump over to the theme, custom code. And in here is where we're going to paste in the JavaScript. So that way you guys can start to see what it looks like when you do an anchor scroll. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that code in. And from here, I'd like to just kind of give you an overview of what this code does. So first, let's just talk about how the course gets generated in Rise, because without that knowledge, you won't really understand why we're doing some of this thing like mutation observers. So as you may be aware or not aware, Rise, when it builds out your lessons, it does not drop in all of the HTML all at once. It actually waits until, one, you're in that lesson, and then it doesn't add anything beyond a continue button. So there's a little bit of a red flag here that you should not try to create any sort of anchor links that go beyond a continue button. You have to have those within an existing continue button. Because again, the element just doesn't exist at all in the DOM, in that HTML document. So, good to know, but from there, let's just assume your use case is similar to ours, where we have a section, and within that section, there's no continue buttons. I'm not going from one lesson to another lesson. We're just staying right here, and I just want to scroll you down and back up. Cool. So now, let's talk about what a mutation observer is. A mutation observer basically sets up a listening event for any changes that happen on your HTML, which we need to look for because it dynamically creates elements based on where you're at and where you're at in a lesson and if you're beyond a continue page and blah, blah, blah. So mutation observers are needed for us to be able to pick up based on any changes that happen in the DOM. And then from there, what we need to look for is any link that contains this anchor ID in which we've not processed, because again, we don't want to reprocess things that we've already processed. So then from there, if we find any, great. Now we need to go and update those links accordingly. So again, this will go through and find any link that has not been processed, go through each of those links and set this processed option to it. From there, go to the link itself, which is that A element, and set a listener event, which goes through and actually prevents the click target from firing. Therefore, you're not actually going to get a new window to open up because we're going to take over from here and run all of our logic. So that'll prevent all the default actions. And then what we need to do is we need to go get the scroll container, which actually is a specific div called PageWrap, which is kind of nested down in the HTML, and it's not the HTML body itself, but it's a specific div that scrolls. So we need to grab that, and then where we are scrolling down to based on the anchor it finds. And if both of those things exist, it's going to scroll to those smoothly. Now I did skip over this offset because there is actually an ability in the JavaScript that I'm going to provide for you to set up offsets. So that way, if you want to adjust how far down it scrolls, you could actually just set up this data attribute for offset, and it will allow you to update that. So I'll show an example of that here in a second. But let's go ahead and save this. And now that that's saved, over here we can test this out. So we'll go to the begin, we'll scroll down, and if this works, it should automatically scroll us down. Oh, that didn't work. So let's go back. We'll go over to preview instead. Most likely I needed to hit run. I think that's why. So we'll go here, hit begin, and click that, and perfect. It scrolled down. You should hit run. If you hit run, it'll actually inject that JavaScript. If you hit save, you'd have to refresh the page. Either way, it gets the JavaScript to run. From here, we're in a good spot though. So now when I click this anchor link, it takes me down to the area in which we want to scroll, which really honestly for where we scroll to on this isn't bad, but I do want to show you what that offset looks like. So let's go back into our lesson, and we'll go down to this area in which we're going to scroll to. And if we add on this anchor, the offset attribute, and what we want to do is just offset by 30 pixels is essentially what that will do. And this will just go upward 30 pixels. So that way we add a little bit of space between it and then that top ribbon that exists. If you wanted to go beyond it, maybe you've got a use case where it's like text you could anchor to, but really where you want to anchor is beyond that, like an image or another block below it. There's totally options that you could do, and then you could just use a negative offset. But most people are going to think about it in a positive, give a gap. So either way, however you want to run that, no big deal. But now let's try this in preview. So we scroll down, click the link, and there you can see a nice gap between where we want to scroll so it doesn't feel too tight to the top, which is awesome. Now we need to get this style to go back to the matching of the rest of these styles here, and then we'll go through one more use case. So let's talk about how to update this style, because updating links is kind of a pain. You can't just go in here and change the color itself. Like, let's just make that black, because Rise overrides all styles to be their specific color based on what they've got set up. But you can override that. So as you can see, when I added that color, it created this span with this color style to it. So if you just take this color style and you put it inside of this link itself and put it on the span, then that would actually apply the color like you would expect. So we'll go ahead and remove this additional span that is unnecessary. And the other thing that I don't really like about this is the underline. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that as well. So that is the text decoration. And we'll just say none. Go ahead and close that out, clear that out, and boom. Now here looks to be like our style of everything else. And then when we go into preview, you'll still get that nice hover state of the click cursor. So depending on your style, you may want it to be underlined and you may want to choose a color, but that is how you can get colors to get updated. Cool. From here, it's basically just kind of copy and paste across the board, but I do want to do another link for you, and we'll just kind of quickly go through that process. So going down to this scroll back to top, this one's kind of a fun one because we'll be able to reuse this all over the place. So if we just go, this link already exists. As I mentioned, you have to create a span, and then we've got the data anchor ID, and in here, we're just going to call this top, and we've got to make sure to close this out after the strong. Oops. There we go. And now that that is created, we have to create our anchor to, which I'm just going to anchor to this because it feels pretty safe. And as I mentioned, here's a block level element, and this inline element gets closed, and we now need to create a new span for us to be able to anchor to. So we'll go ahead and do that. The data anchor ID. Perfect. Close that out. Hit preview. And now we should be able to click this top item here to get us down to our clarifying ambiguity section, and then click this to take us back up top. Great. Works well. Again, you could add that offset to get you a good offset. From here, I mean, honestly, this link is reusable. So you could either make that a block template, or honestly, you could just take this text here and just, well, what I would do is grab this paragraph section and jump down to other sections and then literally just replace that whole thing. So we can close that out, and then that would work for both of those. So let's go ahead and test that. So there's the first one, here's the second one, and that takes you all the way back up top, which is awesome. And then again, you only have to set up your offset on where you're going to. So there you have it. Quick, easy way for you to be able to jump into a Rise course and create some anchor links that allow you to jump around from a section up top to down below, as the example that we've seen. There's lots of fun use cases that you could use this for. And as I had mentioned kind of throughout the course, this only really works right now within a singular lesson in a Rise course, because if you try to go from one lesson to another, it has a hard time, again, because all of those elements don't quite exist on the page. There are potential ways in which you could use something like query parameters and be able to jump to a new lesson and then pick up a query parameter and then auto scroll you down. But again, make sure that nothing is beyond a continue button, because once you use continue buttons, that really is difficult at that point because those elements just won't exist until you press the continue button, and then it would be available for you to scroll down to. So just be careful exactly how you're using it. And as I had mentioned, I'll have all this code linked in the description so you can jump in and grab that. And as always, feel free to reach out to our team as we're always happy to help. Thanks.